Hi, good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Philip Macmillan, and I continue to ask uncomfortable questions. So, before I start, let me warn you that some of the images that you see here, if you're squeamish, you may not want to look at. I will warn you before I show them to you, so don't worry, it won't just jump at you. But what we're doing here is an impromptu discussion. Literally, about half an hour ago, I knew I had to do an update as to my thoughts about embalmers clots. If you hadn't heard about it, you will. And I reached out to Richard Hirschman and I said, what are you seeing now? And he responded quickly. So I thought, you know what? Let me check and see if he's available. And so he was available. So I quickly put everything together and we are here to chat. And just as I put up the live, I got a message from Tom Haviland, who was the guy who was doing all the surveys. And I said, Tom, why don't you join us? And this is where we are. This is one of these impromptu discussions, and we have got Richard and Tom. So listen, because just in case people don't quite know who you are, I'll ask first Tom and then Richard to do a quick introduction of yourselves as the impromptu discussion continues. Why don't you go ahead, Tom?
Thanks, Dr. McMillan, for having me on again. I'm a retired U.S. Air Force major, and I watched that movie Died Suddenly, that hour-long documentary that Richard Hirschman and other embalmers were in, about 6 or 7 of them, and said they were seeing these unusual white fibrous clots in their corpses. So I called the Ohio Embalmers Association the very next day, located in Cincinnati, Ohio. I talked to their now president, Mr. Woody Wilson, who runs his own funeral home in Marysville, Ohio, about an hour north of where I live, and he does his own embalming. And he said, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. Woody's now the president of that association. So I knew that Richard and the other embalmers in that movie, this was not a hoax, this is a real thing. So that led me to the creation of these worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys I've been doing for the last 3 years to see the timing and the prevalence of these unusual white fibrous clots and another phenomenon called microclotting.
Excellent. And Richard?
Yes, sir. My name is Richard Hirschman. I'm a mortician. I started in this field back in 2001. I've been embalming for, what is it now? We're getting closer to 24 years. So been doing this for a long time. I've embalmed thousands of bodies. And what happened after the rollout of the COVID vaccine in early 2021, I started noticing unusually strange looking clots. Typical blood clots are red and jelly-like. They look like literally a piece of grape jelly. But these were white and fibrous, and some of them were extremely long. Some of them are smaller, but it's the white characteristic that makes it unusual. And this is kind of what I'm talking about here. So anyway, in January of 2022, there was a Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long got me in contact or gave my number to a lady by the name of Dr. Jane Ruby, and she did an interview of me, and that exposed this white clot thing to the world. And because of that, Died Suddenly happened, where they came out and visited me. I've also had people like Cheryl Atkinson come out to Alabama here and interviewed myself, as well as Tom Haviland. So by speaking out and making this a little bit of an issue, it has gotten us a lot more information from what we knew back in 2022.
Excellent. Excellent. I just wanted to make it clear to people here on something. My position is that I'm just a clinician and I am interested in unusual patterns. So say, for instance, because of my interest, I have pulled together almost 10 years of NHS hospital admission data with ICD codes to try and understand changing patterns after the pandemic, because I'm just interested in the science. And so it doesn't matter what I see. If I see anything unusual, I usually am very curious to try and understand what could be the mechanism, especially because I've been looking at autoimmune patterns. So this is where I fit. I know that there may be some people with a scientific background who are thinking, oh my goodness, this again, this is just a hoax. And I want you to pause a minute and I'm going to show you what the images look like. So for anybody who thinks this is some kind of ridiculous thing, you need to see what it is the embalmers are observing. Now, you can choose to ignore it, but it is definitely not right. So without any further ado, let me show you some of the images that Richard has sent to me. And this is what one of them looks like. And who was this one here? This is a close-up of it. And it's these white bits here that are very unusual. This bit here looks a bit more normal, doesn't it?
Correct. The grape jelly-like portions are somewhat normal, but even with those, what I find unusual is a lot of times they don't break apart as easily. You tap on it and the red blood cells kind of falls away, but yet at the same time you end up with this strand of material running through it.
And so it is, as I said, and this is the important thing for people who are listening, is that this you hadn't seen really. Well, let me rephrase that. It could have happened before the pandemic, but it was not often that you would see something like that.
Well, that's just it, Dr. McMillan. Prior to the pandemic, blood clots are typically almost always red and jelly-like. Yes, they can be kind of large, but they're very slick, slippery, and they fall apart pretty easily. I mean, they're still a clot, but they're like jelly. They don't hold up. It's those white kind of fibrous strands, these unusual looking ribbons of this material. That is what stands out so much, is this white material, because it's not red. Blood is red.
And the embalmers in my surveys, Dr. McMillan, corroborate what Richard's saying, that, we have a comment section at the end, and the embalmers have also said that the white fibrous clots are very tough and rubbery, calamari-like. They also have noticed over the years that the grape jelly clots have actually gotten more like grape jam now. They're actually more viscous in nature. In fact, Mr. Woody Wilson, the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, was one of the very first ones that commented that to me. He actually saw that happen in 2020, the year we had COVID, yet but no vaccines. That phenomenon, the viscosity of the grape jelly clots starting to increase.
That is correct.
Yeah.
In late 2020, in late 2020, prior to the vaccine rollout, the clotting issue was increasing, but they were still very red jelly-like, but there was a lot more of it. And I think now, after all of this time and research that's been going on, the spike protein was in the virus, so it was a clotting issue as well. So it makes sense that when they introduced the vaccine, which makes your body create spike protein, that this situation wouldn't get better. It would actually make it worse, which I think is what happened.
So I think that I think it's important to hold the science on this, because as I said, a lot of people could watch this and think that it is some kind of weird conspiracy, people who are just anti-vax coming up with stuff that they just want to discredit the great rollout of the vaccines and so on. And I think one of the things you highlighted there is that it did occur before the vaccine rollout, but you do note that it probably accelerated after the vaccine rollout. So one of the other questions is, and this was what had caused me to reach out to you, Richard, is that I was curious to know whether or not the numbers were about the same, slightly increased or less, because in effect, a lot more people are not up to date. And so if it was directly correlated, that's an important question. What have you observed?
Well, yes. When you originally messaged me about this, I was going through a period of time where it seemed like it had been slowing down. But I told you in the message, it's kind of like a roller coaster. As soon as I think it's going away, it comes back. And just recently, I sent you some more images that were from this month. And just to give it an idea, 3 out of the last 5 bodies that I embalmed displayed this. And it wasn't just a little bit. These are the pictures that I've recently sent you. So, you know, when I think it's going away, then it comes back. But when I look at the overall numbers and the percentages of the bodies that I'm embalming, I'm still noticing probably about 50% of the corpses I'm embalming still have this. But it does seem like the larger ones have slowed down. Well, then again, until just recently in the pictures that I sent you, they come back. And I don't understand, you know, what's going on with that. I don't understand why some people it's worse while other people it's less. I have no idea.
And Richard, that's somewhat corroborated by what the embalmers that I've surveyed are saying. In my last worldwide survey that I did last December in 2024, at the end of that year, the embalmers around the world, 301 of them, 250 said they were still seeing the white fibrous clots. They were seeing them in 27% of their corpses, Dr. McMillan, and they were seeing the microclotting in about 22% of their corpses. Now, I was able to run a survey at the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association's annual convention. I was invited there by their president earlier this year, Mr. Taylor Moore, to speak to their embalmers and funeral directors because they're very concerned about this. You know, we're into year 4 of this now. These white fibrous clots, like Richard said, are not going away. So I actually ran a survey at that convention on June the 8th of this year. And there was a small sample size. There were only 28 embalmers in the room. But of those, 19 of them said that they were seeing the white fibrous clots. And they were seeing the white fibrous clots in about 17% of their corpses. And they were also seeing the microclotting in 17% of their corpses as well. So about 1 out of every 6 dead bodies. And I thought of that, maybe a couple reasons for that. Hopefully, it is a trend that the white fibrous clots and microclotting is starting to go down. But it's a small sample size, so that could be a problem. Also, I thought about the fact that I was taking this survey in Tennessee, and that's a red state. And less people probably took the COVID-19 vaccine. So you might expect to find less of the white fibrous clots and the percentage of corpses in a red state than you would in a blue state like a California or New York. So I don't know what's happening there for sure, but I will be running another worldwide survey in a few weeks. I'm actually traveling to Austin, Texas this week to go to a Children's Health Defense Conference. I'll be meeting with Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, Dr. Peter McCullough, others in this movement. And I'll be talking about the white fibrous clots with them when I get a chance. And after I get back from that, I'll be running my 2025 end-of-year worldwide survey to see what the embalmers and funeral directors are seeing across the world in the U.S., Canada, UK, Australia in the year 2025. So stand by, and I'll come to you with those numbers when I get them at the end of this year.
Yeah, and this here is another one that you had shared. Oops, let me just get it back. This one here. Yeah, these are definitely abnormal, but I can't imagine, Richard, that this could be present in somebody just casually walking around, because even a fragment of this would block an artery and you'd have a stroke or a heart attack or something. So these must occur either just ante-mortem for most people. Now, we know that with the whistleblower that they saw it in live people, but these people were pretty sick. And so,
see, Dr. McMillan, I'm not convinced of that totally yet. I still think that it's possible for them to be smaller, and while blood's still to be able to flow around them, you may feel completely normal, asymptomatic, but then, you know, it finally occludes an artery or vein, and that's when you get your
the only point I'd make. Yeah, I understand what he's saying there, but I remember when we had Dr. Shetty with us, and he said maybe it's like a cast on the artery, because we see angiograms all the time, and if it was present, you know, if it was, say, flapping about, you would see it on an angiogram. And so we don't really see that. And so this is part of the reason why I think the medical community is ignoring it, because their view would be that if that is there, we would see it. So this must be purely a post-mortem occurrence. But we know it occurs in terms of people who have severe disease. So it occurs in live people as well. And what seems to happen is that if it occurs in someone who is alive, that is going to cause a very rapid demise. So this is now where the history becomes very important, Richard. When you think about one of the cases you had mentioned recently, a middle-aged person who died suddenly. Do you know what was the history? Anything at all that can help me to make sense?
The case that we're referring to was a middle-aged person who died suddenly, and they suspect this person had a major medical event, but there was no other person involved, and there was no autopsy. So, they're just assuming the individual probably had a massive heart attack or something like that. But when I was doing the embalming process, I saw some of this white fibrous material coming out in the blood, and I commented to one of the other embalmers that just so happened to be in the room. I'm like, no wonder they suspect this person died of a massive heart attack, because it wouldn't take much of this to create a serious medical event like that. But I do believe you are onto something, and that is, are these things antemortem or postmortem? And that has been a huge question. And for the most part, I believed in the very beginning that I found it difficult to believe that these could be postmortem, because if it were just a typical postmortem clot, we would have been familiar with this throughout the last couple of decades I've been embalming, and as well as all of the other embalmers. This would be something that was normal, but it's not. It's not normal, and therefore, because of their strength, we morticians found it almost impossible to imagine that these things could possibly be postmortem. However, I think you're right. I think there's something in the plasma of the blood. There's something going on in the blood circulatory system, and I think it's in the plasma, which is kind of scary, because if that is in the plasma goes not just in the circulatory system, it can go through your lymph nodes and go into all kinds of other areas. And I think what happens is enough of this material starts to accumulate, and then something happens. Whether it's a pH level in your body might change, whether it's a temperature change. I don't know what the change is, but once that blood stops moving, these things may continue to condense and form postmortem. Whether they're antemortem or postmortem, either way, it's still the abnormal clot issue that was my concern from the very, very beginning.
I think you've hit on something very important here. And yes, the antemortem, postmortem question is more pathophysiology, trying to understand it. But you are absolutely right that I don't know how anybody with a scientific mind can see something like this and not think we have got to figure out why. This is the other one you showed me. I mean, and can anybody explain to me why we would not have investigated this for 4 years? I mean, oh my goodness.
It's
whatever you think. I mean,
Dr. McMillan, I'm actually, last year, as you know, I tried to run a cath lab worker blood clot survey with vascular surgeons, endovascular specialists, cardiologists across the United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. I sent an email with a link to a survey that actually included a couple questions about the COVID vaccines as well, because unlike the embalmers, these doctors do have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. So I sent it out to all these societies for vascular surgery around the world, as well as 120 vascular surgeons across the United States. I got 0 responses, Dr. McMillan. 0, none. The United States Society for Vascular Surgery, they're headquartered in Rosemont, Illinois, and they brag on their website of having over 6,300 member surgeons across the United States, did not want to take my survey. So then I said, well, I'll see if I can get information from the other end, the patient end, and I ran a worldwide people's blood clot survey, And with the help of Dr. John Campbell and Clayton Morris and his wife Natalie on Redacted, they displayed a QR code for me. I ran that survey, and within 2 weeks, Dr. McMillan, I got over 1,400 responses from people all over the world that had blood clots or had people they knew that had blood clots. So the patients are happy to tell you about their blood clotting experience, even though the doctors are staying silent about it. It's just, it's criminal. It's a tragedy.
Yeah. So let me explain again, and just so that people understand. So whilst I'm curious, it doesn't mean everybody is curious. And so the way how it works in the medical fraternity is that you want evidence. You want something to demonstrate that this is not a red herring, so to speak. Now, the problem is that if no one investigates it, the medical community, you have to realize that the medical community is very, very trusting. They trust the experts. If the experts are not saying anything, they trust that nothing is happening. Now, this is one of the reasons why the COVID pandemic worked out the way that it did, because there is so much emphasis on that trust of expertise. So suddenly, if something goes wrong and for whatever reason the experts are influenced, nothing changes. Now, additionally, I think that, how do I say this? I suspect that among the vascular surgeons, they probably are seeing abnormal things. But what they're thinking in their mind is, I don't know for certain that this is really abnormal. And it could be just related to infection. And so they then nobody will want to take that first step of saying, this is what I'm seeing and this is a problem. Because, Tom, you spoke with a doctor who was seeing it and then they pulled back. What happened?
Yeah, in fact, are you able to do a shared screen with me? Because he did send me a photo of a white fibrous clot that he removed. It was a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, along with the angiograms. But I kind of like to show the audience if we can do that.
You can share the screen. You'll have, but you have one screen or two screens?
Just one screen.
All right. It's just that you won't be able to see us, but try it and let's see. Oh, just click on share or present screen.
Where's that at?
It's down at the bottom on your screen. You should see a present button.
Let's see.
No, you don't see it. Can you see yours, Richard?
Oh, wait a minute.
I see a plus sign. It looks like inside of a.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, share screen.
Yeah. And make sure you share the whole screen. They have a few tabs at the top. And then click share and click, and then I'll see it and I'll see if I can bring it up.
Let's see.
You've got one there, Richard. While he's there, oh boy. Oh yes,
one.
That's the 19 centimeter one. Now, as I said, there is no way that is compatible with with life. So I know that this is happening as well.
And it came out like this.
Yeah. So this is going to be I've got it here. Tom.
Can you gentlemen see that?
Yeah, let me just try and see if I can share it. Yeah.
Okay, you see the clot over on the right.
Well, I see your the email. I don't see the other thing at the moment. So this is the problem, is that
here we go.
I can't, oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now this is from my whistleblower, right? And I can tell you who he is. His name is Dr. Mohanad Bashir. He's an endovascular specialist and cardiologist from Jacksonville, Florida. Introduced to me by another doctor, Dr. Dan McDyer, an OBGYN, who's seeing horrific clotting problems in his OBGYN practice. And what you see over there on the right-hand side of the screen, Dr. McMillan, is a white fibrous clot still covered in blood before it's washed off. It'll be see that pinkish cord running down through the middle? That'll become a white fibrous clot after it gets washed off. This was a deep vein thrombosis removed from a gentleman's leg. And on the far left of the screen, vertically, about halfway up, you can see a kind of a darkened black stream running up, and then it gets stopped. That's because the clot was in that blood vessel and blocked the entire blood flow in that blood vessel. But when you look in the middle of the screen, you see a dark line running vertically. That is the restored blood flow after the clot's been removed. So this is, evidence of a successful procedure, right? Now the whole blood vessel is unblocked now that the clot's been removed and blood flow has been restored. But what's interesting about this, earlier, we talked about how pathologists are having a hard time seeing white fibrous clots when they're in people. And that's why we suspect they might be only forming right before the person, dies suddenly. But I think that they might be walking around for months at a time with the clots growing inside them, but it's difficult to detect them in the angiograms because they actually take on the entire shape of the blood vessels. Like you say, they become a cast of that portion of the vascular system. So,
as I said, when I think about it objectively, and so this is the scientific part that I'm saying. So even with a cast, because those clots are not a cast per se. They don't have a cylindrical shape. They are solid. When they're cut open, they look they look what's the word again? Amyloid-like. This is what Kevin McKernan. So there is something about it that suggests that it has to form outside, or let me rephrase it. As you showed in that picture with a deep vein thrombosis, a clot like that could be in a vein with blood flowing around it, and you then have symptoms and the person then gets it fished out. That's what the whistleblower was finding, is that the clots that were able to be found in people who are alive were almost always in veins, mostly. On the other hand, what Richard is seeing is that you are seeing clots not just in veins, but in arteries. Now,
Yep.
I'm telling you, a clot like that in an artery, it has to cause a symptom, whether or not it's an obstruction to the blood flow in the leg and you get an ischemic leg, or if it goes to the heart, you will get a heart attack. If it goes to the intestine, you will have bowel ischemia. If it goes to the brain, you will have a stroke. If it goes to the kidney, you will have a renal infarct. These things you will see. And so this is where I'm saying that I know that, yes, it can potentially occur one-off, which then causes a symptom in somebody, and they are often always very sick with it. But if you are seeing it in 3 out of 5 patients, that must mean that in the arterial system, these clots are occurring or accumulating either just around the point of death and after. Does that make sense?
It does. And I had another thought, and that is, since of the pandemic and all of the mess that the medical system's gone through, you have a lot of people that do not trust the medical system anymore. And so it is possible that some of these people may have symptoms and they're like, I'm sure it's just in my head. I don't trust my doctors anymore, so I'm not going to go. And then they get to a point where they get so sick that they end up finally going, and it's too late. And that might be the people that the vascular surgeons are seeing, because they do catch them in time, where other people might be just avoiding them. Because I've seen these clots in younger people, and I can tell you, most of the time when I would go to my doctor in the past, oh, you're too young to have any kind of issue. So they just rule out any possibility that I'm having some other issue. And they're probably right. They're the experts. I'm not an expert. But I don't know. It just, to me, seems like there's a distrust with the medical system right now. There's a distrust with the experts. And so it's
the doctors themselves were afraid, Richard. Like I said, just like you, Dr. McMillan, my whistleblower then went dark on me. About a month later, he sent me an email saying, "Tom, I have been instructed to terminate communications immediately. Sorry for the inconvenience." So I'm guessing somebody at his hospital administration staff got to him, said, "Hey, we don't want you talking about this in public. We'll go after your license. We'll go after your board certifications." So it's a very bad situation, you know.
Yeah, no doubt is that when my whistleblower came forward, so he's still anonymous, and he shared the images, and he knew the risk that he was taking with regards to his job, and it is sad that it is like that, but at the moment, medicine, I think, quite brutally honest, medicine has been hijacked, and what I would say, if there are any clinicians listening, is that the pure fundamentals of medicine, the desire to help patients and to get them better, haven't changed. But there is a culture of fear where nobody wants to be the first to highlight something, because you don't want the scrutiny to then come to you as being the first to highlight something. What you will hear is that it's more consensus. If a number of people come together, then they will talk about it. But to get one person, because if you think about your whistleblower of, if there are 30,000, right, people who doing similar procedures, and that one person comes out, the public will perceive that everybody else is hiding something. And so therefore, for the interest of that specific specialty, it would be better for them to demonize that person. Right. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And this is what happens in almost any situation. But my call is that, and as I say, I keep on showing the picture because I'm telling you, you cannot, unless you made this up, Richard. And even if you did make it up, I don't know what techniques you would have used to produce something like this. That in itself would be a remarkable feat. So the point is that it is real. We just don't understand the mechanisms.
I want to remind the audience that we have captured on video at the Tennessee Funeral Director Association annual convention on June the 8th, 18 of the 28 embalmers with their raised hands in that room saying they're seeing the white fibrous clots that Richard and others have said. So we have it captured on video footage, Dr. McMillan. It's crystal clear. The majority, about 2/3 of the embalmers that were there at that convention said, yes, they are indeed seeing these same white fibrous clots. And what I plan on doing next week when I go to Austin, Texas, like I said, I'll be speaking with Senator Ron Johnson. He's been very good about bringing forth hearings here in the United States. And I'll be asking him if it's possible for him to have Dr. Bashir, this endovascular specialist from Jacksonville, come forward to testify in front of his committee about finding the white fibrous clots and taking them out of people and living people in these cath labs. And I'll ask him if he can get whistleblower protection for Dr. Bashir so that his hospital system will not be able to retaliate against him in terms of, going after his license or board certifications for coming forward. So I'll ask Senator Johnson about possible whistleblower protection, not just for him, but for Dr. Dan McDyer, who I also mentioned. And then also these other, there's presidents of these embalmer associations and funeral director associations that also said that they're seeing the clots, and I have emails from them. Mr. Woody Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, Mr. Kevin Swire, the president of the Manitoba, Canada Funeral Service Association, he's seeing the clots. Mr. Chris Calvi Jr., president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association, and then also, of course, Mr. Taylor Moore, who was the president of the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, who invited me there. These are four, well-respected funeral directors and embalmers, and then two doctors, well-respected, who have said they are seeing the clots. And if they can get whistleblower protection, I think, they might come forward to testify.
Yeah, I think that the more I reflect on this, and as I said, I understand the general feeling from the medical community, because I only opened the door to the question properly in about 2023, in April of 2023, when I spoke to you, Tom, for the first time. And prior to that, what you tend to do is you kind of just ignore it. I don't know. It's probably not real. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. And this is what you will tend to think from a clinical point of view, because you think if this was real, somebody in the scientific community would have taken this on. But it looks as though no. I mean, this is what I find uncanny. And I was saying to you beforehand, Richard, it feels like the movie, Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
It's
the new normal, hasn't it, Richard?
It has. It has. And I'm glad you brought up the fake, because, I was accused early on that I was making this stuff up. And here's the thing. Thanks for speaking out. I've had so many people communicate. And one of the people that has done some research that I think is remarkable is Kevin McCarran in Japan. Kevin McCarran in Japan, I ended up sending him samples, and he's tested them. We had already seen him under thioflavin T testing positive, or it looks amyloid. He basically is saying, yes, these are amyloid. He's done these tests as well. But one of the things that he did that gets overlooked is he took a piece of that sample and he sent it to Kevin McCarran to do some DNA work on it to make sure that it's not a hoax, that it's not, something that was made up. And he did the DNA analysis or whatever it is he does and confirmed that this is human origin. This is not some kind of a silicone sealant. This is not some kind of a hoax that.
Well, that was also proved, Richard, when McCarran took a 5 micrometer slice of one of the embalmers clots you sent to him and put it under a scanning electron microscope at a magnification of 5,000 times. You can see the twisted fibrinogen in there, all matted, a matted mess. It doesn't look like those nice, smooth spaghetti noodles that it's supposed to look like when it turns into fibrin. It becomes a clot that's then easy to break down. Instead, it's this matted, twisted, folded mess with nodules on it, and our enzyme plasmin cannot attach that and break it down. So then it starts to grow into these monster clots.
Yeah, so I think that we'll tie it up now, because I suspect we can just keep going on and on. But here is the point that I am thinking, is that from a scientific point of view, and you have to realize that the embalmers clots are at one end of the spectrum, because what we're seeing in the middle is a microclotting. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have amyloid clots in their bloodstream, and that is clear, but it's at microscopic levels. And a recent presentation was showing, even with regards to apheresis treatments to trap these microclots, take them out of the bloodstream. And what they are finding, which was very interesting, is that when they remove the microclotting over a period of days and then weeks, the clotting improved. And what they thought was the mechanism is that it's almost as if the ability of the bloodstream because how does it, the blood has to be maintained in a way that it doesn't clot. But at the same time, it can't be too thin that it causes you to bleed. And there's a very tight balance in terms of the enzymes that keep the blood thin enough to keep on going. And what they're saying is that when you remove the microclots, you find it's almost as if the blood is able to then handle the clotting process better. So it seems as it's an overwhelm. And my suspicion is that that overwhelm accelerates on and around the demise. So meaning somebody who, and this is where actually the point I'd like to say to you, Richard, is that when you see these clots, try, if you can, and if the family are willing, I want you to ask them whether or not the individual had any symptoms prior to the demise. In the say the week before, meaning if they were dying of sepsis, that's clear. But if they had been relatively well beforehand, that piece of information in terms of the history is so very valuable to help us to understand what in the world could cause this to occur close to someone dying, which didn't kill them before. You know, this is the bit that we really, really need to try and understand. And sadly, someone like yourself, Richard, you're now the front line because I don't see these patients.
Well, unfortunately, Dr. McMillan, is as a trade embalmer, I don't meet with families. I usually am up at the funeral home during odd hours, and I usually, most of the time, there's nobody in that room but myself. And because I don't do the funeral directing itself, I don't have the opportunity to sit and talk with these individuals. I can tell you that I do speak to funeral directors, and a lot of times we get the stories of what happened as that process goes on. And there's a lot of people that are dying of aggressive cancers these days. One of the unusual things that I see are cancers now that are taking people out before the cancers have had a chance to devastate the body. Typically, they lose their hair through treatments and they get emaciated. Not that I don't ever see that anymore, but it seems like nowadays, if the cancers are killing them before I can recognize that they even had cancer. But pancreatic cancer, brain tumors, these are things that are on the rise that we notice. We notice other things. And it's not just me that notices it, it's the funeral directors themselves. They're like, boy, Richard, it seems like we've had a lot of pancreatic cancers lately. Boy, it seems like we've had an awful lot of brain tumors. I remember when we didn't hardly ever see pancreatic cancer. I don't remember, years ago where it seemed like we didn't see very many fetal demises. And that's another thing that we see a lot of. I'm concerned about all of that stuff. And what's sad is most of the fetal demises of people that are losing their babies while they're late term, they're not even posted on there's no obituary for them. Most of the people won't know. And back in the day, we would see fetal demises on a rarity. I mean, it would be one of those things we'd see every once in a while. And now I've go into a funeral. It's one of the funeral homes I go to. It's not that I see it all the time, but when we sit there and have 2 or 3 fetal demises in the cooler at one time, that's highly unusual.
The Tennessee embalmers, by the way, when I ran the survey on June the 8th of this year, corroborated what Richard's talking about. About 30% of them have seen about a 20% increase in infant deaths in the year 2025 compared to the years 2019 and prior. So that's an alarming trend. By the way, Dr. McMillan, in that people's blood clot survey that I mentioned that I ran last October of 2024, there, like I said, there was over 1,400 responses, and about, I think, 1,100 of those people actually commented in the comment section. I will send you that raw file with all those 1,100 comments so you can go through them. There might be some tidbits in there about people's blood clotting experience and what it felt like leading up to them either having the blood clot treated, physically removed, or maybe broken down with clot busting drugs, and whatever resolution they got. So I'll send you that large Survey Monkey file with all those 1,100 responses, and you can peruse through those.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you again, guys, for coming on the spur of the moment. And as I said, my role here is to keep the science on this. I don't want anyone to get away with saying that they thought this was just some wacky stuff that somebody came up with. No, this is real. We just don't fully understand the mechanism. I've been looking at it. I still think it's probably autoimmune, but again, it must be happening close to death as to why it doesn't happen before. It's so many layers that we have to uncover. But we would only be able to do that if we were actually actively trying. When we see that pattern where this is the system that should happen, Embalmer sees a patient with abnormal clots. The embalmer contacts maybe the coroner service to say this is an unusual death. The coroner then goes back to the hospital to look at the patterns, to then investigate if there were any unusual patterns that we can then find, and any patterns that could highlight why it is occurring, and then the study of the clots themselves. So there are so many layers that need to be done. And sadly, we are now in year 5. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. And I warn the scientific community, you know, this is one of those times. It's similar to, I guess, the bankers when the financial crash happened. Every banker was tarred with the same brush, whether or not they knew what was going on. And in the same way, I think the medical community is going to be tarred with this if we don't ask questions and if we don't actively seek to find answers. So again, thank you very much, gentlemen. Really appreciate what you're doing. And we'll continue to keep asking questions until something gets done.
Great. Thank you, Dr. McMillan.
All right. Well, just stay with me for the outro, and we'll then chat a bit more. Okay, then, everyone else. Thank you.
A hero, an immune adventure, Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.